Howdy, welcome back to Dion Talk. In this video, I'm going to be a little bit irritated with myself. Sometimes when we learn a system that helps us reach financial freedom, we get so tunnel visioned that we think it's the best way because it's the way that's working. And hindsight is 2020. Recently, I've learned that there's a strategy that I probably could have used, or at least tried to use on every single one of my deals, and I never even thought of it. So I wonder how many people are watching me that haven't thought of this as well, because this is a strategy that can solve a lot of problems, and it can actually work out a lot more in your favor if you ask a question, because the answer is always no if you don't ask. When we're buying a property, we don't always have to secure a loan from a bank or hard money or friends and family. Sometimes the owner can carry the note on the property, seller financing. This is a way to avoid a large immediate capital gains expense for the seller. It's a way for them to exit being a landlord and still receive monthly payments. And I have two friends, Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time and Matt, the Lumberjack landlord, that are going to share with me because, well, I've never even tried it. They've at least tried it, and Mike's done quite a few deals. Pretty sure I'm going to be able to tell Matt he's made some mistakes, but we'll see how that goes. So let's start with you, Mike. Tell me how your experience has gone with seller financing and why was it an option you went for?
Yeah, so seller financing is one of those things, once you try it and it works, it's like, why didn't I do that more? So my first use of seller financing goes way back to like pre-crash. And it's actually written about in my book. I think it was the Ferris property I write about. I'm basically running around. I think we have 2 units at the time. This is going to be a 2-family. So we'll get to our third property or 4 units, right? So it's we have 2 houses. This is a 2-house lot. But the problem is we only have, I'll just use round numbers, 10 grand. And let's just use round numbers, say it costs 100 grand. Well, at the time, the only way for me to get the loan in that market was to do 20% down, or at least as I thought. And I didn't have it, but it was a great deal. It was one of those deals that made the first 2 look stupid. It was that kind of deal. I remember trying to think of all the ways we can get this thing done. And it was actually my real estate agent who said, have you ever thought about asking the seller to carry a second? Because maybe they would, right? Because again, the seller had owned it a while. They were done. It was vacant. It wasn't perfect. So they knew they were, it wasn't a perfect property. So we asked, and I didn't know what to ask for. I didn't know. So I paid, my bank first was at 6%. So I offered 8%. Again, I didn't know. I wouldn't do that today, but that's what I offered. I offered a 5-year balloon, not knowing I would offer 10 years today. But again, I used seller financing the first time as a second to get a great deal. And the seller said yes, didn't haggle, took it 8%, 10%. Again, we're using 100 grand, so $10,000 loan. I was able to close. Bank 80%, seller in for second. I brought in 10 grand, and boom, now we're at 4 units. So that is wonderful. I think that is a strategy that I would suggest more people think about, is using the seller as a second. Where that works is the seller wants some money now, but not all of it. That is very powerful. I've done deals since then where the seller wants 50% now and is willing to take 50% later payments. So you go get a bank first, and then, the seller takes 50, and, so you can get really creative with these. Second, one of the best transactions I ever did was I bought 2 fourplexes, a triplex, and 4 houses from one seller. Collectively speaking, these were worth about 1.4, 1.5 as is. What the seller wanted was guaranteed payments the rest of his life, and he figured he had about 10 years left. But he was willing to do a deal with somebody who knew would keep them. So my reputation mattered in this case. So we actually, again, we'll use round numbers, negotiated a price of $1 million. So I made $500,000 the day we signed. But I signed a prepayment penalty that was significant, that I couldn't refi or sell any of them for 10 years. I was okay with that. My plan is to hold them for 30 years, right? That was important to the seller. So listen. So we've done that. We closed that deal like in 3 weeks. We did a couple walkthrough inspections, did the deal. It's been a home run for us going forward. And then seller financing could work again when they have lots of equity or no equity. right? You can do subject to and all of those things. So again, we often miss as new investors the fact that sellers, maybe cash isn't the answer. We always think it is, right? All the wholesalers out there are like, hey, I can give you cash. I can give you cash. Well, what happens if the seller doesn't want cash? Maybe they have a tax problem. Maybe they have greedy relatives that'll just take the money. Maybe they want income, like that one seller's like, I want to go live on a cruise ship the last 10 years, and this is going to be how I do it. I will hand you $500,000 if you don't cash me out for 10 years. Okay, no problem. I think I can do that. Right? So ask and listen. So seller financing has been a huge benefit and likely will be a huge benefit for us going forward.
Asking about seller financing is something that I think I'm going to do on every deal going forward. Even if it's off the MLS, using agents, just bring it up. It can't hurt.
Yeah.
One of the things that happens as a mistake by a lot of the people that I've worked with to help reach financial freedom, and this might be something that you guys have seen too. Mm-hmm. New investors think they need to understand why somebody is selling a property, not even just how they want to sell it. But I recently had somebody say, I want to buy this deal, but I think it's too good to be true because they've only owned it for 3 years. Why would somebody want to sell a property in 3 years that's cash flowing? And I said, none of that matters. Will it cash flow for you? And can you get them to accept the offer? That's all you need to think about. And now I would add in seller financing. So Matt, have you, I want to say successfully, but have you used seller financing as a strategy?
Yes, I've used it. Not successfully yet.
Okay.
But not today.
But not today.
But I will. So the deal that I had, for the smaller ones, a lot of the stuff that I've had, I did a lot of, it was always asked, but believe it or not, it was not something that I think my agents, the brokers that I used, weren't super comfortable in talking about it. And I think that was a big thing. I think one of the things that I've changed as part of my strategy is actually handing them a sheet that they can then hand to the seller and say, hey, just as an FYI, have you considered this? Because I think that most people falter because they don't really understand what it is. I'm working on a deal right now. It's a massive deal. It's a 7-figure deal, and at least massive for me. And so it is it was a $1.55 million deal. And I finally got the seller to take on about $175,000 worth of that note.
As a second, I'm guessing.
As a second.
That's
and
awesome.
So that was great. And it was fantastic. Actually, I got him to do that when the price was 145, and then he upped the price to 155. And I was like, then the bank got involved and they were like, that's now too expensive, second note, blah, blah, blah. So that actually ended up blowing up the deal because I wasn't going to come to the table with 30% down of 1.55 million, i.e. $455,000 or $465,000 plus closing costs, $500,000. So I wasn't going to buy that property more. So that deal fell apart based on the fact that we couldn't get the seller financing done. But what's amazing to me is that people don't understand so many, I'd say probably 95% of sellers have no idea that seller financing is even an option for them.
Yes.
And even worse is I'd say 99% of sellers have no idea how positive it can impact them financially. Avoiding capital gains, actually having a monthly payment that's interest only. Like there's a million different things about this. And so it's now part of the game that we offer to any of the deals that we're working on. But yeah, so far we haven't been able. I have one that the owner turned down the seller financing, and I was honestly I'm shocked. I'm like, wow, okay. I mean, apparently you just love paying 20% in cap gains because I know exactly what he paid for the property.
Yeah,
it's a public record. So we'll see what happens. But so far not good for me.
Yeah, what I would tell you is you've got to take more ownership of this.
Yeah.
Again, not you, meaning the people watching this. Because again, you talked about 90% of sellers not knowing. I would say 99.9% of real estate agents think seller financing is illegal, let alone possible, right?
Sure.
So you got to have that conversation. One thing you can, luckily, if you have the course, one of the sections in seller financing is with CPA. And we actually break down the math about how you can save significant taxes as a seller. that was very important for me to add because, again, I have a background in accounting, so I get it and it's easy for me. But I had Bob Langworthy break it down in painstakingly detail. So if you're in the course, go look at that stuff. Seller financing can be a huge home run for sellers.
So I have a friend, Keith, who's in the financial world, and he pointed out with seller financing that, and I want to point this out for somebody that's just hearing about this for the first time, because it's probably where my brain would have went at the first thought of this, was seller financing, if you have a bank note, is usually not the way to get a 100% finance deal, because you can get the seller to agree to that and you can agree to it. But that lender, if they're carrying a note, needs to know that you have skin in the game. So it is a way to reduce a 30% down to 20, 15, maybe even 10%, which it sounds like that's the way it was for your deal, Mike, as you had 10, seller carried some, bank had some. So it doesn't get you to that zero cash deal that people always think is the holy grail of, I wouldn't want to be that leveraged anyways. Right. Cool. So seller financing is a great option. Are you still using that in your strategies, or have you even asked on the last couple of deals you've made?
Seller financing is a part of every conversation. I actually have some wholesalers that actively market with that message from me. I will likely do another YouTube video, something I do on my channel about once a month or once every 6 weeks, is I try to speak to the Fresno market. Hey, Mike Zuber, Fresno buyer, want to talk to all the real estate agents and sellers and landlords that are frustrated. I will buy. And oh, by the way, if you want to do seller financing and save on taxes and flip off the IRS, I'm your guy. Let me help you. So I market everywhere I can that seller financing is a good thing.
Okay. And Matt, do you think you'll be using that going forward?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I see the power of it. It's just a matter of, I think like Mike said, I think from an agent perspective, it's something that they can talk about, or it's something they can say the words, but they don't really understand the mechanics of it. So when you can't explain something and you're the one offering it, when you can't explain it really well, so the seller can really grab a hold of it and say, wow, I didn't even think that was a possibility. So I'm going to look at something this weekend. It's 2 duplexes. That was the first thing out of my mouth that I talked to the agent about was they've owned them for over 30 years. Let's at least look at seller financing, because I think that they'll love the approach and it will put them in a much stronger position.
Yeah, I mean, what I would do in that example is, again, the agent. You got to make it really simple with the listing agent, right? Yes. They've owned it 30 years. What that means is they have zero cost basis.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Right. So they're going to have to pay depreciation recapture. And oh, by the way, do they like the IRS? If they don't, I should talk to them. That's what I would do. Yeah, and I would stop there.
Yeah, we had the conversation because it was, I think it's about $600,000 and they own them outright. And if you're only paying 20% cap gains, it's still going to be 120 grand.
Yeah, it'll be worse than that because of depreciation recapture.
Correct.
Which will be,
that's why the minimum basis is 120. And if they do go retroactive on the 39.7, now it's $240,000. And you literally just gave that. I mean, you gave that away and you got nothing for it. Whereas in this particular case, they can potentially even do complete seller financing.
Yeah.
Maybe I give them $100,000 and say, I'll give you 100 grand and then you finance the other 500 and they could be tickled pink with that. So
yeah, they'll get income for the rest of their lives, not have the headache. Mm-hmm. And then when they pass on, because what you don't realize, folks, is what does the seller have? They have a note. That's a financial instrument. That note has value. They could, in theory, take that note, sell it on the open market and get cash for it, right? It's an asset that's on their balance sheet. It will be part of their estate.
Another thing that a lot of people don't even know exists is that note market.
Yes.
That there's a whole market of people buying and selling notes. There's a note convention coming up. Mm-hmm. I think in November or something. I don't know the date, but it's a whole community. The really important thing I think with seller financing for anybody watching this who's thinking, hey, that's a great tactic, I want to try it, is if you can't explain something to somebody else simply, you don't understand it well enough. So right now, if you couldn't tell somebody sitting next to you how seller financing worked, it is not the time to pitch it to a seller. Do some research, find the videos, read some blogs, educate yourself on the subject, and possibly make that next deal better than it was going to be. Until my next video, thanks for coming to my Dion Talk.
We're sorry. The number you have dialed is not in service at this time.
Thank you, Matt, for doing the not today thing. Something I've never really brought up is when I make a video and put it out, I can like script in, here's the thought where I'll go, but not today, right?
Yeah.
How do you do that in a live video?
Yeah.
So thanks. I'll stop recording now.